I traveled across the country to see the new home of my daughter whom I had raised by sacrificing everything. But she whispered, "Don't tell the neighbors you're my father. Just be an old friend from California." The betrayal struck like a knife, contrasting my love with her shame for her ordinary father. She regretted it because the consequences of her lie destroyed her perfect world. "Don't tell the neighbors you're my father. Just say you're an old family friend from California." Emily's whisper cut through the warm June evening like a blade finding its mark. I stood beside my beaten Ford pickup, one hand still gripping the door handle, the other frozen halfway to my duffel bag. 3 days of driving across the country through Nevada's endless desert and Pennsylvania's rolling hills, and this was my welcome. The golden hour light painted everything beautiful. The manicured lawns, the pristine driveways, the expensive cars that made my truck look like a relic. But Emily's words turned that beauty cold. "All right, Emily," my voice came out flat, emotionless. 40 years of raising her, of working double shifts and selling my tools to fund her dreams, and I was now a family friend. The lie sat in my throat like broken glass. She positioned herself between me and the neighbor's yard, her designer dress catching the evening breeze. Everything about her screamed success: the perfect hair, the subtle jewelry, the confidence that money brings, everything except her eyes, which darted nervously toward the neighboring houses. Beautiful weather for traveling. The neighbor approached with genuine warmth, wiping grass stains from his hands. His lawnmower sat silent behind him, another symbol of suburban perfection. I forced my weathered face into something resembling a smile. "Yes, long drive from the West Coast." The words felt foreign in my mouth. I was performing now, playing a role in my daughter's carefully constructed life. The neighbor nodded enthusiastically, launching into small talk about California weather, while I stood there like an actor who'd forgotten his lines. Emily's relief was palpable when the conversation ended. She practically vibrated with nervous energy, her gaze scanning the street for other potential witnesses to my arrival. I grabbed my duffel bag worn canvas that had traveled with me through 20 years of construction jobs and slung it over my shoulder. The neighbor waved goodbye, returning to his perfect lawn. His mower roared back to life, drowning out the sound of my heart breaking in small, quiet pieces. Emily turned toward the house, her heels clicking against the pristine driveway. "Come on, let's get you inside." I followed her up the walkway, past flower beds that looked like magazine spreads. Every step took me further from the man who'd driven 3,000 miles to see his daughter and closer to whatever stranger I was supposed to be. The front door loomed ahead, white and imposing, leading into a life where I apparently didn't belong. My calloused fingers tightened around the bag's strap as Emily fumbled with her keys. Behind us, the neighbor's mower continued its steady rhythm, a soundtrack to my transformation from father to fiction. Emily pushed open the front door, and I stepped into what felt like a museum exhibit titled "How the Other Half Lives." Cool air conditioning hit my face, carrying the artificial scent of vanilla candles instead of home cooking. The living room stretched before us like a showroom floor, everything coordinated, expensive, and cold. "Richard's in his office finishing up some calls," Emily said, her voice artificially bright. "Let me show you around." I followed her through rooms that belonged in a design magazine. The furniture looked like it had never been truly used, all sharp angles and neutral colors. My work boots felt too loud against the hardwood floors, each step announcing my intrusion into this pristine world. The walls told their own story. Framed photographs lined the mantel and hallway. Richard's family skiing in Aspen, romantic shots from European vacations. The kids at private school graduations, professional portraits in expensive frames. Not a single picture included me. "Lots of memories on these walls," I said, my voice carefully neutral. Emily's step faltered slightly. "That's from our Tuscany trip last year." Richard knows all the best restaurants there. In the kitchen, marble countertops gleamed under pendant lights that probably cost more than my monthly pension. Emily quickly moved a familiar cookie container, my homemade oatmeal chocolate chip, from the counter to a cabinet. Even my gifts were being hidden. "We're on keto now," she explained without meeting my eyes, "but the kids might try your cookies." Might. The word hung in the air like a question mark. Richard appeared as if summoned, phone still pressed to his ear. He held up one finger, the universal signal for important people must wait, while finishing his conversation. When he finally hung up, his smile was perfectly practiced. "We're glad to have you here, Jack. Anne's told me so much about you." His handshake was firm, calculated to demonstrate confidence without seeming aggressive. Everything about him screamed success. The tailored shirt, the expensive watch, the way he moved through the house like he owned not just the property but everyone in it. "Beautiful house," I said, running my hand along the marble island. "Solid foundation." Something flickered in Richard's eyes at the word foundation. He knew, of course, Emily would have had to explain how they'd afforded the down payment for this showcase, but acknowledging my contribution would complicate their narrative. "Emily has excellent taste," he replied smoothly, deflecting credit away from uncomfortable truths. The guest room felt like a hotel suite. White bedding, generic artwork, a card on the nightstand reading, "Welcome guests," in elegant script. No family photos here either. No hint that the man staying here had helped make any of this possible. I set my duffel bag on the pristine white bedspread, the worn canvas looking like a mistake against the expensive fabric. Through the window, I could see the neighbor still working on his lawn, living his own version of suburban perfection. The sound of Richard's phone buzzing filled the silence. Another important call requiring his immediate attention. Emily hovered in the doorway, looking anywhere but at my bag or my face. "Dinner's at 7:30, she said. "Just make yourself comfortable. Make yourself comfortable in a room designed to ensure no one ever truly could." The dining room chandelier cast sharp shadows across crystal glasses and china plates arranged with military precision. I took my assigned seat at the table's end, physically separated from the family cluster at the other side. The symbolism wasn't lost on me. I was literally at the margins of their carefully orchestrated life. Richard commanded the head of the table like a corporate boardroom, carving expensive steak with surgical precision. Emily positioned herself as the perfect supporting actress, serving and smoothing conversations like a professional hostess. The teenage kids barely looked up from their phones, earbuds partially visible despite dinner table rules. Only my 2-year-old grandson offered genuine warmth, reaching toward me from his high chair with chubby fingers and an unguarded smile. In this room full of performances, his reaction was the only honest one. "Got promoted to senior partner last month," Richard announced, his voice carrying the satisfaction of a man accustomed to impressive headlines. "Now we can afford even more of life's luxuries." Emily beamed at him with practiced adoration. "Yesterday we attended Jessica's charity gala. Such fascinating people. A Manhattan surgeon and IT company CEO who just went public." She rattled off credentials like collecting trading cards. Each prestigious connection, another badge of social climbing success. The 15-year-old grunted something that might have been acknowledgement. The 12-year-old asked if she could be excused early. "I had a good year, too," I offered during a brief lull. "Finished the Miller house renovation, complete foundation rebuild, custom cabinets throughout." The words landed like stones in still water, creating ripples of uncomfortable silence. Emily's fork paused halfway to her mouth. Richard's attention immediately shifted to his wine glass, studying the vintage label with sudden fascination. "Richard, tell us about that corporate merger case," Emily said quickly, steering the conversation back to safer territory. And like that, my contribution to the evening and to their lives was erased. Richard launched into a detailed explanation of legal strategies and billable hours, while I sat there remembering different dinners, kitchen table conversations where Emily shared her college dreams, while I calculated how many overtime shifts would pay for her textbooks. Celebrations when she graduated, when she got her first job, when she called to say she'd found the perfect house. "This is for our family, Dad," she'd said. Then, "a place where we can all be together." I looked around this dining room, where togetherness meant performance, and family meant hiding your history. The baby gurgled and reached for my face again, his tiny fingers touching my cheek with innocent affection. At least someone at this table recognized family when he saw it. Richard checked his phone between bites, the blue screen reflecting off his glasses. "International client, different time zones, you understand." I understood perfectly. Everything here had a hierarchy, and I ranked somewhere below international business calls. Emily filled silences with nervous chatter about neighborhood events and social obligations. The children responded in monosyllables when directly addressed. I sat at my isolated end of the table, watching my daughter conduct this orchestra of artificial harmony, while my homemade cookies remained hidden in her kitchen cabinet. When dinner finally ended, the family dispersed like actors leaving the stage. Richard disappeared to his home office for more important calls. Emily whisked the baby upstairs for his bath routine. The teenagers vanished to their rooms with barely a good night. I was offered a choice: television in the living room or rest in the guest room. Both options meant being alone, which seemed to be the evening's theme. "Guest room sounds good," I said, though sleep felt impossible. Emily nodded with visible relief. "Bathroom's right across the hall. Towels are fresh." I stood at the clear dining table for a moment, looking at the family photos on the distant wall. Professional portraits, vacation memories, milestone celebrations, a complete visual history of their life together. None of them included me. Sleep wouldn't come. I lay on the pristine white bedding, staring at the ceiling, where shadows from passing cars painted brief stories of movement in a motionless room. 11:00 became midnight, and still my mind churned through dinner conversations, Emily's nervous orchestration, Richard's casual dismissals, the children's indifference to their grandfather. The house settled into silence around me. Central Air hummed its artificial lullaby while I replayed every word, every glance, every careful redirection when I tried to contribute something real to their polished world. My wallet pressed against my hip through the thin pajama fabric. 40 years of carrying the same worn leather billfold, and tonight it felt heavier than usual. Not because of money, I'd never had much of that, but because of the papers folded carefully inside, documents I'd saved because my father taught me to always keep the important stuff close. I sat up, pulled the wallet from my pants draped over the chair. The overhead light seemed too bright, too revealing, so I used my phone's flashlight instead. Blue-white glow illuminated the first paper as I unfolded it with careful reverence. Property contract, my signature, bold and confident in black ink, dated 3 years ago. Primary owner Jack Miller. Investment amount $140,000. Percentage of ownership 80%. Emily's name appeared in smaller print 20%, based on financial contribution. $0. 180,000. I whispered to the empty room, primary owner. My signature everywhere. My phone's camera clicked softly as I photographed each page. Evidence, though I wasn't sure yet what I'd need it for. The second document showed the down payment source. My savings account cleaned out. The third revealed the tool sale receipts. 40 years of Craftsman and DeWalt reduced to numbers on a bank deposit slip. The house creaked overhead. Someone walking to the bathroom, probably. I froze until the footsteps faded, then continued my methodical documentation. Wasn't looking for confirmation. Already knew the facts. But seeing them laid out in legal terminology reminded me of something I'd almost forgotten. the difference between what's right and what's comfortable. Thirst drove me to the kitchen around midnight. I moved carefully across the hardwood floors, avoiding the spots that had squeaked during the house tour. The refrigerator's ice maker rumbled to life as I filled a glass with filtered water that tasted like nothing. On my way back, I noticed the laundry room door standing slightly open. Emily was organized to a fault. Everything had its place in her perfect world, but organization also meant filing systems, and filing systems meant records. The folder marked important documents sat on a shelf between detergent and fabric softener. My flashlight revealed mortgage papers, insurance policies, and a copy of our original ownership agreement. Richard's name on the monthly payment obligations, but the property deed told a different story. I photographed everything with the thoroughness of a man who'd spent decades checking blueprints for structural integrity. Details mattered in construction. They mattered here too. Temporary, she said. I murmured to the documents. Nothing here looks temporary. Emily's name appeared in small print throughout, mine in bold headers. That told the real story. Who owned what? Who'd sacrificed what? Who'd built the foundation that others now stood on? By 2 in the morning, I'd created a complete digital record of my legal position. The phone's battery showed 67%, and I had 37 photos documenting 3 years of financial reality that dinner conversation had carefully avoided. Back in the guest room, I sat on the bed's edge, scrolling through images of contracts and bank records, legal proof of what my heart already knew. I wasn't a family friend visiting from California. I was the foundation this house was built on, buried under layers of social pretense, but still solid, still bearing the weight of everything above it. Dawn light crept through the window as I finally set the phone aside. Sleep came easier now, though I couldn't say if it was from exhaustion or the strange peace that comes with absolute clarity. The next evening, Emily announced we'd been invited to the neighbor's party with the enthusiasm of someone describing a military operation. She'd spent the day in careful preparation, arranging the house like a stage set, while I helped Richard trim hedges and pretended yesterday's document review hadn't happened. "Wear this instead," she said, holding up one of Richard's shirts, expensive cotton with a designer label peeking from the collar. "So you'll fit in better." I looked at my own flannel shirt, soft from years of washing, honest as worn denim, then at Richard's pristine offering, pressed and perfect as everything else in this house. Sure thing. The borrowed shirt pulled tight across my shoulders made me move differently. In the bathroom mirror, I looked like myself wearing a costume, trying to pass for someone I'd never been. Emily appeared behind me, adjusting the collar with nervous precision. "Remember, you're our friend from California. We met through mutual acquaintances. Keep it simple." Her reflection showed the strain of maintaining so many careful lies. I wanted to tell her about the documents, about legal ownership and financial contributions, but watching her hands shake as she fixed my collar told me this wasn't the moment. Emily was drowning in her own deceptions, and throwing more truth at her would only push her deeper underwater. The neighbor's backyard looked like a magazine spread. String lights draped between mature oak trees. An outdoor kitchen that costs more than most people's cars. Furniture arranged with the casual precision of professional staging. Bob the host greeted us with practiced warmth while grilling steaks that probably cost $50 each. "How's the real estate investment business treating you?" he asked. Apparently, Emily had already established my fictional occupation. "I helped with this house," I said, gesturing toward Emily's property line. Emily's cough sounded like a car engine refusing to start. "Jack, tell them about California weather." The conversation flowed around me like water around a stone: vacation homes in the Hamptons, private school admission strategies, wine vintages from trips to Tuscany. I listened to people casually mention spending more on weekend getaways than I'd made in good months. Watched them perform wealth like actors hitting their marks. Jessica, the neighborhood social coordinator, wore her status like jewelry. Every sentence polished to reflect maximum light. We're considering private tutoring for Madison. Harvard admission is so competitive these days. Sarah nodded knowingly. Our pediatrician's wife manages applications for Manhattan families. The connections are everything. Mike, who'd apparently built some tech company from nothing, spoke in casual millions while sipping craft cocktails. His success story sounded rehearsed, like a TED Talk delivered over backyard barbecue. The secret is knowing when to scale, he explained to Richard, who listened with the hungry attention of someone always calculating his next advancement. I attempted to contribute. Built a foundation system last year that saved the homeowner $30,000 in structural repairs. Construction consulting and interjected quickly, very specialized field, but I'd already revealed too much. Bob's eyes sharpened with interest. You work in construction. Must be quite different from investment real estate. Different skills, same principles, I said, trying to navigate Emily's fictional minefield. Foundation work mostly, making sure everything stays solid underneath. Emily positioned herself between me and the more dangerous conversations, steering me towards safer topics like weather and travel. But every subject seemed to lead back to money, status, connections, the currency of their carefully curated world. Don't share everything, Dad, Emily whispered during a lull when others focused on Mike's latest acquisition story. People judge quickly here. The word Dad slipped out like a confession she immediately regretted. She glanced around nervously, but no one had heard over the laughter about someone's yacht maintenance problems. As the evening progressed, I watched these people perform their prosperity with theatrical precision. Every conversation was a carefully choreographed display of success. Every casual mention of expensive purchases, a subtle assertion of hierarchy. They weren't just neighbors. They were an audience evaluating each other's performances in the ongoing drama of suburban supremacy. The borrowed shirt felt tighter with each passing hour. I didn't belong in this theater, couldn't remember my lines in their ongoing production of perfect lives. Emily's relief when we finally said our goodbyes was almost palpable, her smile lasting just long enough for the final curtain call. Walking back across the perfectly manicured space between their world and ours, the neighbors' laughter faded behind us like applause from a show I'd never auditioned for. Emily removed her party smile the moment we stepped inside, exhaustion replacing performance like an actress stepping off stage. Richard disappeared to his office for important international calls, leaving us standing in the foyer where expensive silence filled the spaces between us. I need some air, I said, which wasn't entirely a lie. The garage door stood slightly open, caught by the evening breeze. Through the gap, I glimpsed organized shelves and the geometric shadows of stored boxes. Something about that glimpse pulled me forward, maybe the hope of finding something genuine in this house of careful presentations. I slipped through the opening and pulled the cord for the overhead bulb. Harsh light revealed Emily's organization system in full glory. Christmas decorations labeled by room, seasonal clothes sorted by size, lawn equipment arranged with military precision, everything in its place, everything serving a purpose in the machinery of their perfect life. But tucked behind the holiday storage, almost hidden by strings of carefully wound lights, sat a box labeled in Emily's handwriting. Old things, as if memories had expiration dates. I pulled the box forward, dust motes dancing in the light like ghosts of forgotten moments. The cardboard felt soft with age, corners worn from handling, and when I lifted the lid, time folded backward on itself. Photos, dozens of them, chronicling the life I'd almost forgotten Emily remembered. Emily at 6 with her front teeth missing, grinning beside the fish we'd caught at Silver Lake. Emily at 12, serious and proud in her first baseball uniform. I taught her to slide into home base the summer after her mother died. Emily at 18 in her graduation cap, my arm around her shoulders. Both of us crying happy tears because we'd made it through the hard years together. My hands trembled as I lifted each photo. These preserved moments of when we were enough for each other, before social status and neighborhood approval became the measures of worth, before I became the embarrassing secret she had to hide in garages and careful lies. Beneath the photos lay treasures I'd forgotten I'd given her. The first baseball glove we'd bought together, stiff with age but carefully preserved. A Father's Day card made from construction paper and crayon, where 8-year-old Emily had written "Best Dad Ever" in careful block letters. The acceptance letter to her college, and folded inside it my own note of congratulation. I unfolded the paper, recognizing my younger self's handwriting. Never forget who stands with you through everything. Your foundation will always be solid because you're built on love, not just dreams. Always yours, Dad. She kept it, I whispered to the garage's patient silence. But hid it here. Every memory preserved but locked away like shameful secrets. The baseball glove I'd bought when I noticed her envying the boys on the playground. The tools I'd given her for high school graduation. So you'll never need anyone to fix things for you, I'd said, not knowing she'd eventually need fixing from me. Here was our entire relationship, carefully maintained but banished to storage. Love archived but not displayed. History acknowledged but never celebrated. I was looking at my daughter's heart, and it lived in a garage behind Christmas decorations and lawnmower fuel. I held up the fishing photo, remembering that perfect Saturday when grief over her mother's death had finally started loosening its grip on both of us. Emily had caught a bass bigger than her forearm, and we'd celebrated with root beer and beef jerky, while the sun painted the lake golden. "I gave you everything," I said to that smiling little girl in the photo. "You gave me this garage." But even as I said it, I knew that wasn't quite fair. Emily had kept these memories when she could have thrown them away, hidden them when she could have destroyed them. Maybe this garage was in exile. Maybe it was the only safe place she could preserve a father she loved but couldn't acknowledge. I repacked everything carefully, reverently, except for one photo, Emily and me with our fish, both grinning like we'd conquered the world together. This one I slipped into my wallet next to the property contracts. Different kinds of proof, but proof nonetheless. The overhead light clicked off, plunging the garage back into gentle darkness. I stood there for a moment, holding both versions of my daughter, the child who'd needed me and the woman who'd learned to hide that need. Outside, the party's laughter had faded to memory, leaving only the sound of my footsteps on the concrete floor and the whisper of old secrets settling back into their careful storage. Saturday afternoon brought a clarity I hadn't felt since arriving. The morning passed quietly, family sleeping late after their social performance, while I walked the neighborhood with different eyes. Every manicured lawn, every perfect driveway, every symbol of their carefully constructed paradise suddenly looked different when viewed through the lens of ownership rather than exclusion. By 2:00, Emily had left for grocery shopping with the kids, and Richard disappeared to his golf game with the same neighbors who'd evaluated my worth the night before. The house settled into afternoon silence, giving me the privacy I needed for important business. I sat on the guest room bed with my phone, scrolling through the contacts until I found the name I needed. Tom Martinez, attorney at law. We'd worked together on my previous property purchase back when Emily was still in college and grateful for any help her old man could provide. "Tom, this is Jack Miller. I need you to review the property contract for the house on Maple Drive in Westchester. I want to understand my exact rights as primary stakeholder." His voice carried the same professional warmth I remembered from our earlier dealings. "Of course, Jack. I have your file here. You're referring to the property where you provided the majority investment for your daughter's purchase." "That's correct. 80% ownership based on my $180,000 down payment. Papers rustled through the phone speaker as Tom pulled the relevant documents. I spread my own copies across the white bedspread, photographing each page while we talked. The afternoon light streaming through the window illuminated every signature, every dollar amount, every legal clause that established my position. Without your signature, they cannot modify ownership percentages, transfer title, or make major financial decisions regarding the property. Tom explained with the patience of someone who'd handled similar family situations before. You maintain full legal control as primary stakeholder. I leaned forward, pen poised over a notepad I'd found in the guest room desk. What are my options if I want to exercise those rights? Legally speaking, you could reclaim full occupancy immediately. The current residents would be considered tenants without formal lease agreements. You could also require their signatures on any refinancing, force a sale, or establish formal rental arrangements. The words settled into my mind like pieces of a puzzle, finally finding their proper places. Not revenge, justice, not cruelty, clarity about what belonged to whom. This isn't about anger, Tom. It's about making sure everyone understands the real foundation this family stands on. I understand completely, Jack. Family property disputes require careful handling, but your legal position is quite strong. Do you want me to prepare any formal documentation? I organized the photos on my phone into a systematic folder while we discussed timelines and procedures. Each image represented a different aspect of my investment. Down payment receipts, original contracts, amendment forms that Emily and Richard had never bothered to review carefully. Let me think about next steps, I told Tom. I'll call you back early next week with my decision. After hanging up, I sat in the quiet room, surrounded by evidence of my legal standing. 3 days ago, I'd driven across the country, hopping for connection with my daughter. Now, I held documented proof that I owned the majority of everything she'd used to build her new identity. The irony wasn't lost on me. Emily had asked me not to tell the neighbors I was her father. What she hadn't realized was that I didn't need their acceptance. I owned the stage where their entire social performance took place. Car doors slammed in the driveway, followed by Emily's voice, directing the kids to help with groceries. I quickly organized the papers back into their careful order, slipped the phone into my pocket, and emerged from the guest room as Emily struggled through the front door with organic produce and expensive wine. "How was your morning, Dad?" she asked, her voice carrying the casual warmth of someone who believed all family relationships operated within predictable boundaries. "Very productive," I replied, helping her with the grocery bags. "Got some important business sorted out." Emily smiled with the satisfaction of someone whose weekend plans were falling into place exactly as organized. "Great, Richard and I are thinking of taking the kids to the lake house tomorrow. Would you mind watching the house just for the day?" I nodded with what I hoped looked like paternal accommodation, happy to keep an eye on things. The irony of watching my own property would have been amusing if it weren't so perfectly symbolic of everything wrong with our current arrangement. By 6:00, the expensive SUV had disappeared down the tree-lined street, taking Emily's carefully orchestrated family toward whatever lake house adventure Richard's connections had arranged. I stood on the front porch, waving goodbye like the helpful father-in-law, then turned back toward the house that legally belonged primarily to me. For the first time since arriving, I moved through the rooms without the performance of being a guest. No careful steps on hardwood floors, no nervous glances toward family photos that excluded me, no pretending to belong in spaces I'd helped purchase. The transformation felt subtle but profound, like finally standing upright after years of unconscious crouching. The kitchen welcomed me with expensive appliances and Richard's well-stocked refrigerator. I selected a prime ribeye steak, the kind of cut that costs more than I used to spend on groceries for a week. But tonight felt like an occasion worth marking, even if I was the only one who understood why. salt, and pepper. That's all good meat needs, despite the cabinet full of exotic spices that Emily probably used to impress dinner guests. I heated the cast iron skillet, the one practical pan among all the designer cookware, and listened to the steak sizzle with the honest sound of real food being prepared simply. Steak the way she loved it as a kid, I said to the empty kitchen, remembering Emily at 12. Before European trips and organic everything, before the arugula and brief phase, the memory triggered others, teaching Emily to cook after her mother died. Both of us learning that shared meals could heal grief in ways that words couldn't reach. Emily's favorite dinner had been steak and mashed potatoes. Nothing fancy, just comfort food prepared with attention and love. I carried my plate to the patio, where Richard's outdoor furniture cost more than my first car. The evening light painted everything golden, including the perfectly manicured yard that required professional maintenance. I was effectively funding through my down payment investment. The steak tasted exactly like I remembered, honest, straightforward, satisfying in ways that expensive restaurant meals never managed. I thought about Emily's recent obsession with keto diets and organic certifications. How my homemade cookies had been quietly hidden away like embarrassing evidence of our shared past. Family, I said to the suburban silence. Funny how definitions change when money enters the picture. A memory surfaced, Emily calling 3 years ago about the house purchase. Her voice bright with excitement and possibility. This is for our family, Dad, our future together. A place where we can all belong. All belong. The phrase echoed differently now, surrounded by the evidence of systematic exclusion from the life my investment had made possible. I finished dinner as the sun painted shadows across the expensive patio furniture, then carried my dishes back to the kitchen, where every appliance gleamed, with the sterile perfection of things that were purchased rather than earned. The dishwasher hummed efficiently while I explored the house with an owner's perspective rather than a visitor's careful navigation. In the living room, I settled into what I'd started thinking of as my chair, the comfortable one facing the window, positioned where natural light revealed the careful arrangement of family photos that documented everyone's happiness except mine. The fishing picture from the garage sat propped against my phone on the side table. Emily's 6-year-old grin, a stark contrast to the formal portraits surrounding us. The house felt different in solitude, not cold or unwelcoming, but honest in ways it couldn't be when occupied by people performing their various roles. Here was the foundation I'd built, the security I'd provided, the investment that had given Emily the freedom to construct whatever identity she chose. I'd built her a foundation. She'd used it to build walls against me. But foundations, I knew from decades of construction work, determined everything that could be built on top of them. Change the foundation, and everything above it had to shift accordingly. The thought was still settling into my consciousness. When car doors slammed in the driveway earlier than expected, Sunday evening, Emily's voice calling instructions about luggage. Richard's deeper tones responding with the tired authority of someone accustomed to being in charge. They were home early, and I was sitting in my chair in my house, no longer pretending to be anyone other than exactly who I was. Dad, thank you so much for watching the house. Emily burst through the front door with the energetic gratitude of someone whose weekend had gone exactly according to plan. The lake was perfect, and knowing you were here made everything so relaxing. I stood from my chair slowly, deliberately, and watched her face register something different in my posture, and not the careful accommodation of a grateful guest, but the steady presence of someone completely comfortable in his surroundings. My pleasure, I said, and meant it more than she could possibly understand. Richard appeared behind her, hauling designer luggage and wearing the satisfied expression of a man whose lifestyle had once again performed exactly as advertised. The children trudged past with the exhausted indifference of kids who'd been entertained all day, and now wanted nothing more than their familiar bedrooms. Everything goes smoothly here, Richard asked, already mentally transitioning to whatever work concerns would dominate his evening. Very smoothly, I replied. Had some time to think about property management, actually legal aspects of ownership and responsibility. Something in my tone made Emily pause in her unpacking routine. Richard's attention sharpened with the automatic weariness of a lawyer detecting unusual phrasing in seemingly casual conversation. I pulled out my phone, scrolled to the photo folder I had organized yesterday, and held up the screen showing our original property contract with my signature prominent in black ink. You asked me not to tell neighbors I'm your father. I respected that. But this house is mine, and I'm reclaiming legal control of property decisions going forward. The words landed like physical blows. Emily's face drained of color so quickly I worried she might faint. Richard's expression shifted through confusion, disbelief, and finally, the cold calculation of someone realizing his assumptions had been fundamentally wrong. Dad, that was temporary. Emily's voice climbed an octave. You can't just this is our home. It's my home, I corrected gently. 80% mine, according to the documents you obviously never read carefully. You live here because I provided the down payment that made it possible. Richard grabbed his phone with the reflexive urgency of someone accustomed to solving problems through legal maneuvering. I'm calling my lawyer. This is harassment, possibly illegal coercion. Call whoever you want, Richard. I'm not taking anything that isn't mine. Just reminding everyone who the actual owner is and what that means for future decisions. The children had frozen in the hallway, sensing adult conflict, without understanding its implications. Emily moved protectively between them and our conversation, her maternal instincts overriding her social panic. But we have a life here. Emily's voice broke with genuine desperation. The kids' schools, my friends, our position in the community, you can't destroy everything. I looked at my daughter, really looked at her, past the designer clothes and carefully maintained facade to the frightened woman underneath, who'd built her entire identity on foundations she'd never bothered to examine. I'm not destroying anything, Emily. I'm clarifying who built what, and who has the right to make decisions about it. Richard paced the marble floor, phone pressed to his ear, leaving increasingly urgent messages for legal contacts who weren't answering their phones on Sunday evening. His confidence cracked visibly as each call went to voicemail, reality slowly penetrating his assumptions about control and ownership. The documents are clear, I continued, my voice steady despite the emotional storm swirling around me. Tom Martinez confirmed everything yesterday. Without my signature, you cannot modify ownership, refinance, or make major decisions about this property. Emily sank into the expensive sofa Richard had probably chosen to impress clients, her hands shaking as the full implications hit her. Not just the house, but the social position it represented, the identity she'd constructed, the security she'd assumed was permanent. Why? She whispered, looking at me with eyes that held equal parts hurt and terror. Why are you doing this to us? I sat down across from her, close enough to see the tears she was trying to hide, far enough to maintain the clarity this conversation required. Ask yourself that question, Emily. Ask yourself why the man who made this life possible became someone you had to hide from your neighbors. The children had retreated upstairs, their footsteps echoing through expensive halls. Richard continued his frantic phone calls, his voice growing more strained with each unsuccessful attempt to reach legal salvation. The baby's cry drifted from somewhere in the house, innocent and immediate in its demands. I need everyone to understand something, I said, standing up with the finality of someone who'd made irreversible decisions. This isn't about revenge or punishment. It's about making sure the foundation of this family is built on truth instead of shame. Emily looked up at me with the same expression she'd worn at 6 years old when I'd explained that her mother wasn't coming home from the hospital. Lost, scared, but still hoping somehow the adults could fix everything. "What happens now?" she asked. I walked toward the guest room, pausing at the threshold of the space I'd been assigned in my own house. Now we figure out what family really means when it's built on honesty instead of hidden sacrifice. 2 hours passed in suffocating silence, punctuated only by the baby's intermittent crying and Richard's frustrated phone calls to voicemail boxes. I remained in the guest room doorway, watching my daughter's carefully constructed world crumble piece by piece like a house built on sand instead of solid ground. Emily sat hunched on the expensive sofa, mascara creating dark tracks down her cheeks, her designer dress wrinkled from tension. The perfect hostess mask had finally slipped, revealing the frightened woman underneath, who'd built her entire identity on foundations she'd never bothered to examine. "Dad, please." Her voice cracked like thin ice under pressure. "You don't understand how people judge here. Your pickup truck, your workflow, your hands. They see all of that and make assumptions." I stepped into the living room's harsh lighting, noting how the expensive fixtures cast shadows that made everyone look hollow, exhausted. "I understand perfectly, Emily. I gave you everything I had, and you hid me away like a shameful secret." Richard paced between the kitchen and living room, phone pressed to his ear with increasing desperation. Each unanswered call stripped away another layer of his professional confidence, revealing the panic of a man discovering his expertise couldn't solve every problem. "But they look at you and see." Emily's words dissolved into broken sobs. "They see a working man who built something with his hands instead of his connections. You see shame. That's the real difference between us." The children had retreated upstairs hours ago, occasionally peering through the banister railings with the wide eyes of witnesses to adult catastrophe. Only the baby's cries punctuated our family crisis. Innocent demands for comfort in a house where no one felt particularly comforting. Emily's breakdown accelerated with the relentless inevitability of structural collapse. I didn't want to be ashamed. When they talk about their families, their histories, their backgrounds, I wanted to belong somewhere that mattered and I didn't matter. She looked up at me with eyes that held decades of accumulated guilt and social climbing exhaustion. I became someone I don't recognize, someone who could hide her own father because his truck didn't match the neighborhood aesthetic. Richard slammed his phone onto the marble counter, the sound echoing through the kitchen like a gavel of defeat. "Every lawyer I know is either unreachable or tells me the same thing. Your documentation is ironclad. Your legal position unassailable." I moved to the kitchen where the fluorescent lighting revealed every crack in our family foundation. Emily followed her movements those of someone walking through debris after an earthquake. "What do you want from us?" Richard demanded. His lawyer's training finally kicked in despite personal desperation. "Money. Recognition, some kind of formal acknowledgement. I want my daughter back," I said simply. "The one who used to be proud of where she came from instead of spending energy hiding it." Emily collapsed against the kitchen island, her perfectly manicured facade completely shattered. "I'm sorry, Daddy. I'm so sorry. I don't know who I became or why I thought pretending you didn't exist would make me more worthy of this life." The baby's crying intensified from upstairs, a sound that seemed to pull Emily back toward her maternal responsibilities. Even as her adult world fell apart around her, she moved toward the stairs with mechanical necessity, pausing at the threshold between kitchen and hallway. "I love you," she whispered without turning around. "I never stopped loving you. I just forgot how to show it honestly." Richard stood among his expensive appliances, looking like a man who discovered his law degree couldn't rewrite fundamental truths about ownership and sacrifice. His phone buzzed with another returned call, but he didn't reach for it. "What happens now?" Anne asked from the stairway, holding our grandson against her shoulder, where his crying gradually subsided into exhausted whimpers. I looked at my daughter, really looked at her, seeing past the designer clothes and social pretensions to the little girl who used to catch fireflies with me on summer evenings before life became complicated by status and appearances. Now I go back to California and handle this properly, I said, through the right channels, with proper documentation, the way things should be done. She nodded with a resigned acceptance of someone who'd finally run out of alternatives to truth. You'll understand soon enough what justice looks like when it's built on love instead of anger. The baby's breathing had settled into peaceful rhythm against Emily's shoulder, creating a moment of genuine quiet in our storm-tossed evening. For the first time since arriving, I reached out and touched my grandson's tiny hand, feeling his fingers curl around mine with the trust that only innocence possesses. 2 weeks in California had given me time to think, to plan, and to remember what really mattered. Emily called every day, her voice tight with anxiety about consequences she couldn't predict. Richard researched legal precedents that wouldn't help him. I spent the time crafting something they'd never expect. Tom Martinez leaned back in his office chair, reviewing the documents I'd had him prepare with the thoroughness of someone who'd seen every variation of family property disputes. "This is unusual, Jack. Most people in your position would simply reclaim the property or force a sale. Most people haven't raised the daughter who betrayed them," I replied, signing the final page with the same careful attention I'd given every important document in my life. "This teaches something different." The trust documentation spread across his mahogany desk like blueprints for a more complex structure than simple revenge. Educational trust for my grandson with the house as primary asset vesting when he turned 25 with a college degree requirement. Emily's family could continue living there, but the property would belong to someone who'd understand its true value. "The boy gets everything at 25, Tom asked, making final notations. "If he earns it." College education demonstrated character, understanding of where the foundation came from. 23 years to learn what his mother forgot. I drove home through familiar Los Angeles streets, past strip malls and working-class neighborhoods where people didn't apologize for their truck models or their callous hands. My house looked exactly as I'd left it, small, honest, comfortable in ways that had nothing to do with status symbols. The phone call to Emily was scheduled for 4:00, giving me time to sit on my front porch with the afternoon sun warming wood that I'd installed myself. The Pacific Ocean glittered in the distance, reminding me of the vast perspective that comes from understanding your place in something larger than social hierarchies. Emily answered on the first ring, her voice carrying the strained brightness of someone expecting bad news but hopping otherwise. "Hi, Dad. How are the legal arrangements going?" "Finished today," I said, rocking slightly in the chair I'd built from scrap lumber 20 years ago. "Papers are signed. Everything's filed properly." Silence stretched between California and New York, filled with her fears and my carefully planned surprise. "The house isn't going to me, Emily." "What do you mean?" I let the words settle before delivering the revelation I'd spent 2 weeks perfecting. Educational trust. Your son gets full ownership when he turns 25, provided he graduates from college. The silence this time felt different, confusion replacing dread, hope creeping into spaces where fear had lived. "Dad, I don't understand after everything I did, everything I said. Why would you give Tommy the house? So he remembers where he came from. So he knows that foundations matter more than facades, that character counts more than connections." Her voice broke with the sound of someone receiving unexpected grace. "Thank you, Daddy. I don't deserve this kindness, but thank you. It's not kindness, Emily. It's investment in him in the future in the hope that he'll value what his grandfather built instead of hiding from it." Through the phone, I heard familiar sounds. Richard's voice asking questions, children playing in backgrounds, domestic life continuing despite fundamental shifts in understanding. Emily's tears came quietly, the kind that wash away accumulated shame rather than expressing new grief. "The trust pays for his education too," I added, "but he'll know who funded it and why. No secrets, no hidden benefactors, no family friends from California." Can we talk more about this, about us, about how to move forward? I smiled at the sunset, beginning to paint my neighborhood golden, thinking about the grandson who'd inherit more than property. He'd inherit the story of sacrifice, love, and the difference between earning something and simply receiving it. Call me tomorrow, Emily. We have 23 years to rebuild what got broken. After hanging up, I sat watching the sun disappear behind the Pacific horizon, holding the fishing photo from Emily's garage. The little girl in the picture had grown up to forget her roots, but her son would have the chance to remember them. My phone rang again, Emily calling back, her voice lighter than I'd heard in years. Dad, I just wanted to say Tommy's first word was Grandpa. Not Dada, not Mama, Grandpa. Through the phone speaker, I heard my grandson babbling in his innocent way, unaware that his future had just been secured by a grandfather he'd learned to know honestly. Tell him I'll see him soon, I said, and meant it. October brought crisp mornings in the kind of clear light that makes everything look possible. I sat on my front porch with coffee and my phone, reading Emily's daily messages that had become the highlight of my routine. Today's photos showed Tommy taking his first independent steps, reaching towards something off camera with the determined curiosity of someone discovering the world. Walking at 14 months, her text read. Heading straight for your toolbox in the garage photo. Maybe he inherited more than your eyes. The transformation in our relationship had been gradual, earned through daily conversations that slowly rebuilt trust, like careful construction work. Emily had surprised her Westchester neighbors by openly introducing me as her father when I'd visited last month, her voice carrying pride instead of shame for the first time in years. Richard had adjusted to the new reality with the practical acceptance of someone who'd realized legal battles couldn't change fundamental truths about family and sacrifice. The children treated me as their grandfather now. No more family friend pretenses. No more careful editing of conversations. My phone buzzed with another message, a video of Tommy babbling seriously at a picture book, his tiny fingers tracing images of construction vehicles. With the focused attention that reminded me of Emily at that age, back when she'd helped me sort screws in my workshop. 22 years and 10 months until he inherits, I said to the morning air, calculating the time Tommy would have to grow into understanding what his inheritance really meant. The trust documents sat in my kitchen drawer, complex legal language that translated into simple hope, that my grandson would value foundations over facades, character over connections, the satisfaction of building something lasting with his own hands. Emily's latest phone calls had been different, longer, more honest, filled with memories she'd rediscovered now that shame no longer blocked access to our shared history. She'd found the courage to tell Tommy stories about his California grandfather, the man who taught her to fish and fix things and stand up straight in any room she entered. Not about revenge, I murmured, watching seagulls argue over territory in the distance. Never was about dignity, about memory, about making sure love outlasts embarrassment. The afternoon mail brought an envelope with Tommy's handprints pressed in clay, accompanied by Emily's note. For Grandpa's workshop, so you remember you're building something important. I carried the clay impression to my garage workshop, where sawdust and honest tools created the kind of atmosphere that Emily had once found comforting before European trips and organic everything became more important than family connection. The handprints found their place on my workbench, small reminders of potential and promise. By the time Tommy turned 25, these tiny hands would be capable of real work, real creation, real understanding of what it meant to build something that lasted. My phone rang as the sun began its descent toward the Pacific horizon. Emily's voice carried the easy warmth of someone who'd finally learned to be comfortable with truth. We're planning Christmas in California, Dad. Tommy's excited to meet his grandfather properly, and I want to show him where his mom learned to be strong. I rocked in my chair, watching stars appear in the darkening sky, while my grandson babbled cheerfully in the background of our conversation. Emily's laughter mixed with Tommy's innocent sounds, creating the kind of family music I'd thought was lost forever. "Bring your appetite," I said. "I'm planning to teach him about real cooking, simple food prepared with attention and love." "He'll love that, Dad. We all will." After hanging up, I sat in the peaceful darkness, holding the fishing photo that had traveled from Emily's hidden garage to my honored place on the kitchen counter. 3 generations of family history in one small image, proof that foundations could survive, even when the structures built on top of them forgot their origins. The phone rang once more, Emily calling back with something she'd forgotten to mention, her voice bubbling with the kind of excitement that reminded me of the little girl who used to believe her father could fix anything. "Dad, I almost forgot. Tommy said his second word today. What was it? Hammer." Clear as anything. "Richard thinks it's a coincidence, but I know better." I smiled into the California night, understanding that some inheritances begin long before legal documents take effect, passed down through blood and memory, and the persistent love that builds foundations strong enough to last generations.